If you want to know why your local utility company is, quietly panicking about their electrical grid this weekend, you actually have to look at peace talks happening 7,000 miles away in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, which sounds like a total stretch at first.
All right. But welcome, learner, to today's deep dive. I mean, our mission today isn't just to recap the news. We are here to cut through this massive daily information flow and find the hidden architecture.
The invisible mechanics shaping the world you're walking around in right now.
Exactly, because it's entirely too easy to view global events in isolation.
Oh, absolutely. You see a diplomatic breakthrough, a new software release, maybe a shift in the housing market, and they feel like totally separate tracks. But when you look at the underlying data, you realize you are looking at a single, highly sensitive ecosystem.
And we have a fascinating ecosystem to map out today. We're working from the comprehensive 4 p.m. news brief from Daily Tech Reader. This is dated Saturday, June 27, 2026, alongside some crucial archived highlights from earlier this month.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
There really is. And what absolutely blew my mind digging into this material is that there is a direct, undeniable causal loop connecting Middle Eastern energy diplomacy straight into the massive explosion of AI infrastructure happening right in your backyard.
It's wild how closely tied they are.
Right. So whether you are actively planning your upcoming Independence Day travel or navigating a corporate workflow, or you're just insanely curious about how the future is being engineered, this deep dive is designed to give you the mental models to understand what is actually driving today's reality. Okay, let's unpack this starting with the geopolitical chessboard.
Right, because geopolitics is really the bedrock of the global resource pyramid. I mean, before we can talk about the future of technology or the macroeconomy, we just have to talk about energy.
Because everything requires power.
Exactly. Everything. And right now, the dominant geopolitical narrative is focused on U.S.-Iran diplomacy.
Yes, and if we look back at the archive from May 31st, there was a tentative agreement reached specifically regarding the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, that was a major signal.
And now, here in late June, negotiators are moving toward a lasting, comprehensive framework. The White House is actively reaffirming that tensions are easing, and Qatar is playing a really crucial role as an intermediary to keep everything moving forward.
And we have to understand the mechanics of why that specific body of water matters so much. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz is a geographic bottleneck.
It's tiny.
Super tiny. At its narrowest point, it's only about 21 miles wide, yet roughly a fifth of the world's total oil consumption passes through it daily.
A fifth? That's staggering.
It really is. So when tensions spike there, shipping insurance rates just explode. Vessels reroute, and the entire global supply chain experiences this immediate friction.
But because of these current diplomatic efforts, shipping in the Strait is physically returning to a normal flow.
Right. Global trade routes are stabilizing.
Yep.
And as a direct result of that, oil prices are hovering near recent lows.
I really look at that 21-mile stretch as a pressure valve for the global economy. Like, when it's open and secure, the economic blood pressure just drops.
That's a great way to visualize it.
But I do want to push back a little on the idea that things are suddenly completely peaceful. Because the brief outlines some heavy geographic friction still happening everywhere else.
Oh, for sure. It's not all quiet.
Right. I mean, Ukraine and Russia are still actively exchanging drone attacks. NATO is having to continually monitor shifting security conditions in Europe. China is out there publicly urging diplomacy in the Middle East. And you've got totally unresolved security issues in Lebanon.
Not to mention domestic borders.
Right. Border and immigration policies remain a massive political flashpoint. Just look at the June 2nd archive. Federal authorities uncovered a 2,000-foot drug tunnel connecting Mexico directly to the U.S.
2,000 feet.
Yeah. So there is still immense physical tension on the map. We're not endorsing any specific political view here. We're just reporting what the sources show there is real friction. But this brings me to my main point of confusion.
Okay, what's that?
We have this energy paradox. If the diplomatic valve in the Middle East is open and oil prices are down and global supply chains are stabilizing, why does the brief mention that utility providers are frantically scrambling to prepare for long-term power growth?
Yeah.
Like, what is driving this grid panic if the energy supply is actually improving?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
we have to separate transportation energy from electrical energy.
Okay, break that down.
Sure. So yes, the fuel that powers cargo ships and airplanes' oil is stabilizing thanks to this diplomacy we just talked about. But there's a totally different, unprecedented drain on the electrical grid that is accelerating way faster than our physical infrastructure can handle.
The AI data centers.
Precisely. We are experiencing a profound divergence. While the oil markets calm down, regional electrical grids are facing a potential crisis.
Because of the sheer amount of power these things draw.
Exactly. You take the staggering gigawatt-level electricity demand required to run these massive new AI facilities, and you overlap that with severe climate pressures.
Like the current European heat wave.
Right, which is heavily straining their regional energy and transportation systems. You put those together, and you start to see why utilities are sounding the alarm.
Which transitions us from the diplomatic world right into the absolute core of the tech sector, which is the insatiable thirst of the AI supercycle.
It really is insatiable.
The tech updates make it incredibly clear. AI infrastructure investment isn't just a category of tech right now. It is consuming almost the entire industry's focus and capital.
It is the single largest capital allocation shift we've seen in decades. The brief highlights that cloud providers and the major hyperscalers are aggressively accelerating global AI data center construction.
Let's define hyperscalers really quickly for anyone who isn't living in the tech world.
Good idea.
We're talking about the massive tech giants, your Amazons, your Microsofts, your Googles, the companies that build and operate the millions of physical servers that make up what we call the cloud.
Exactly. The cloud isn't just floating in the sky. I mean, it's a series of massive warehouse-sized buildings filled with computers.
Lots and lots of computers.
And to build the next generation of AI, they need exponentially more of them. This is entirely fueling the current demand in the semiconductor market. Every chip being manufactured is essentially being swallowed by this AI build-out.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because for the last 20 or 30 years, when we talked about tech companies, we were talking about software.
Right. Code and apps.
Exactly, digital products. But when you look at the scale of this data center construction, these hyperscalers sound less like software developers and more like the railroad barons of the 1800s.
That's a highly accurate way to visualize it. They are building industrial infrastructure.
They are pouring millions of tons of concrete. They are laying literal high-voltage power lines. The physical footprint is so massive that the brief notes it's prompting renewed policy attention on nuclear energy just to power them.
Because wind and solar alone aren't going to cut it for that kind of baseload power.
Right. It's forcing accelerated grid modernization, the deployment of massive battery storage facilities, and entirely new transmission infrastructure. They are physically terraforming the landscape to support software.
But that physical reality and the massive cost of that concrete and electricity is forcing a fundamental evolution in how AI is actually built and sold.
How so?
Well, during the initial boom, the entire philosophy was just brute force. Build massive foundation models, those core underlying AI systems that can do a little bit of everything, and train them on as much data as possible, regardless of the electricity bill.
Just throw power at it.
Exactly. But the data this weekend shows a distinct pivot. Foundation models are now increasingly competing on efficiency.
Wait, explain the mechanism there, because right now, as a consumer, I just pay a flat $20 a month for my AI chatbot. How does this shift to efficiency actually alter the physical build-out?
Okay, think about it from the perspective of an enterprise software vendor. If you are integrating AI into, say, a logistics platform for a global shipping company, every single time that AI generates a response or solves a routing problem, it consumes compute power, which costs electricity. If the foundation model is bloated and inefficient, your profit margins vanish instantly.
Wow, because you're paying for every single calculation.
Yes. That is why usage-based AI pricing is suddenly gaining wide acceptance. Businesses are demanding predictable pricing models. They need measurable AI returns.
The novelty has worn off.
Completely. The era of building cool parlor tricks is over. We have entered the prove-it phase, where these systems have to genuinely improve a company's bottom line to justify the sheer cost of the electricity required to run them.
Okay, so you have these hyperscalers pouring concrete, drawing massive amounts of power, and desperately trying to prove their economic worth to businesses. But laying all that physical wire is really only half the battle. The real bottleneck they are hitting this weekend isn't just physics.
Right, it's the law.
Exactly. The friction of integrating AI into human systems. Let's look at the June 1st archive. Florida became the first state to officially sue OpenAI over ChatGPT safety failures.
Yeah, that was a massive headline.
Right. This isn't a theoretical white paper debate anymore. This is state-level legal action. And yet, at the very same time, the brief tells us that governments are expanding their own adoption of AI across public services to modernize their workforces.
It's a real tug of war.
How does that work? How do you aggressively push to integrate AI into your local government while your neighboring state is suing the creators for safety failures? Are we just upgrading the engine of a moving car while driving down the highway?
We basically are, and we are doing it because the potential efficiency gains are too massive to ignore.
But what about the risks?
Well, when you look at the Florida lawsuit, it fundamentally comes down to the mechanism of hallucination and data accuracy. If an AI system confidently outputs false information regarding public safety or legal statutes or state regulations, the real-world harm is immediate.
Yeah, people rely on that.
But you can't just ban the technology, because then your state or country falls behind. This is precisely why the brief emphasizes that AI governance platforms are becoming just as critical as the AI models themselves.
Governance platforms meaning, like, software that sits on top of the AI to monitor and control what it's doing.
Exactly. Think of it as a supervisor. Having a powerful AI is useless and potentially a massive liability if you cannot govern its behavior, ensure it complies with local laws, and verify its outputs in a live environment.
Which perfectly explains why medical AI regulation is evolving so rapidly right now. I mean, the brief notes AI is already shortening portions of the drug discovery process.
And we should look at how it does that because it's fascinating. AI isn't in a physical lab mixing chemicals in beakers.
Right, it's all digital.
Yeah, it's using vast computing power to simulate protein folding and molecular interactions digitally in seconds, which used to take human scientists years of physical trial and error.
And it's moving heavily into diagnostics too, right? Recognizing patterns in X-rays or MRIs that the human eye might miss.
Exactly. The capability is undeniably there, but the regulatory bodies have to figure out how to certify an algorithm that constantly learns and changes.
It's a recurring theme that capability outruns the rulebook. And that vulnerability brings us to the massive focus on cybersecurity in this weekend's news.
Yeah, cybersecurity spending is a top enterprise priority right now, and for very good reason. The tools used to defend networks are increasingly AI-powered, but so are the tools used to attack them.
An arms race. The brief specifically mentions evolving supply chain threats and hospitals having to really strengthen cyber protections.
And a supply chain threat is particularly insidious. Hackers don't usually attack the heavily defended hospital directly.
They go for the weakest link.
Right. They attack a small, less secure third-party software vendor that the hospital uses for its billing or maybe its inventory. Once they compromise that smaller link, they ride that software update right into the hospital's main network.
Wow, that is terrifying.
It is. Defending against that kind of sprawling automated threat requires AI defense systems. But critically, the brief notes a persistent talent shortage in cybersecurity.
So even with the AI, you still need people.
You cannot fully automate defense. You need highly skilled human oversight to understand the strategic context of an attack.
And that tension between automation and human skill is exactly where I want to go next. Because we've talked about geopolitics, we've talked about massive data centers and state lawsuits. But how is this rewriting our daily culture, our science, and our actual jobs this very weekend?
Let's look at the software developers themselves. The brief notes that AI coding assistants are fundamentally reshaping software development.
So the AI is writing code.
The people writing the code that runs our world are heavily relying on AI to write that code for them. Employers are aggressively prioritizing this AI-assisted productivity, basically demanding that their workforce is upskill. But the fascinating resulting metric is that technology hiring remains highly selective.
Right, because the math completely changes. If one senior developer using an advanced AI coding assistant can suddenly do the work that used to require a team of 3 developers, you don't need to hire as many junior engineers.
Exactly.
You hire fewer people, but the ones you do hire need to be incredibly strategic. They aren't just writing code anymore. They are managing the AI that writes the code.
The human becomes the editor rather than the writer. And we are seeing this acceleration across every frontier of science. You mentioned drug discovery, but it's also converging with biotechnology.
What about space? The brief mentioned some cool stuff there.
Oh, absolutely. In astronomy, AI is identifying new exoplanets.
I love how this works mechanically, because for decades, telescopes would just stare at millions of stars, gathering petabytes of data, just waiting for the tiny fraction of a percent dip in light that happens when a planet crosses in front of a star.
A literal needle in a haystack.
Right. Humans could never manually sort all that data, but an AI pattern recognition system can scan it and find that needle almost instantly.
It's a perfect use case. We are also seeing advanced materials research gaining momentum, and commercial space investment is booming. SpaceX remains the dominant player in commercial launches, and NASA is pushing forward with preparations for the Artemis lunar missions.
And crucially, robotics and embodied AI are advancing across multiple industries. Let's define embodied AI really quick.
Sure.
We're talking about taking these digital brains, the language models and reasoning engines, and putting them into physical robotic bodies that can actually see, process their environment, and physically interact with the real world, whether that's on a factory floor or in a warehouse.
Yes. The AI is stepping out of the screen and into the physical environment.
It feels like every aspect of human endeavor is getting an artificial speed boost.
Mm-hmm.
But here is the beautiful, somewhat ironic contrast of this specific weekend.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
While AI is writing our software and finding new planets and simulating proteins, what is the human race actually doing? According to the culture section of the news brief, we are glued to the knockout stage of the World Cup.
The contrast is striking, isn't it?
It really is. The brief notes that Hollywood and the music industry are actively trying to adapt, evaluating AI-assisted workflows and trying to figure out the legalities of AI-generated content. But at the exact same time, human entertainment remains deeply, stubbornly vital.
People still want people.
Yes. The summer movie season is strong, live entertainment is thriving, podcast audiences are growing.
What's fascinating here is that you are identifying a core psychological reaction to technological abundance. We are seeing the continuous expansion of the creator economy, and interestingly, documentary programming is attracting much larger audiences right now.
Really? Documentaries?
Yeah. There is a deep intrinsic human need for authenticity. Think about the mechanics of value. When anyone with a keyword can generate a photorealistic image or a perfectly structured song in 10 seconds using a text prompt, the intrinsic value of synthetic content plummets.
Because it's effortless. There's no struggle.
Precisely. But the value of a live human sweating on a pitch during a World Cup knockout match, the value of a documentary showing unscripted, real human struggle, that skyrockets.
Wow.
The active debate around AI's role in creative work isn't just a legal debate about copyright. It is a fundamental societal sorting mechanism. The more automated and synthetic our tools become, the more premium we place on verifiable, raw human performance.
That desire for reality is profound, but we still live in an economic reality, and someone has to actually pay for all this progress. Which brings us to the macroeconomic environment.
The bills come due.
Right. None of these data centers get built, none of these models get trained without massive, continuous flows of capital.
And capital is currently operating under a very strict set of rules. The brief shows markets closing the week trying to digest inflation and interest rate expectations. Inflation remains the Federal Reserve's primary concern.
Let's break down the mechanics of the market right now. The brief notes that Treasury yields remain elevated following recent economic reports, and housing affordability continues to challenge prospective homebuyers. So, what does this all mean?
Well,
I want you, the learner, to picture this dynamic. You're an average person trying to buy a house, but you're getting boxed out by high Treasury yields, driving up mortgage rates, and daily inflation is eating into your savings. But in that exact same economy, tech companies are pouring literal billions of dollars into AI data centers, and investors are heavily rewarding their semiconductor earnings. How do these two vastly different realities coexist?
this raises an important question about how macroeconomics acts as a filter for technological development. We have to understand what a high Treasury yield actually does to the market.
Okay, lay it out for us.
A Treasury yield is essentially the return the government pays you for buying their bonds. It is the baseline, risk-free interest rate of the economy. When that yield is high, capital becomes expensive.
Right, because if I can get a guaranteed 5% return from the government with zero risk, why would I lend my money to a risky tech startup unless they can guarantee me a 15% return?
Exactly. In a low interest rate environment where borrowing money is virtually free, companies can afford to run on hype. They can place wild, speculative bets on futuristic technologies that might not turn a profit for a decade. But when capital is expensive, that dynamic dies instantly.
Because investors can't afford to wait.
A high interest rate environment forces ruthless financial discipline.
Ah. And this perfectly connects back to what you were saying earlier about AI foundation models shifting toward efficiency.
Yes, this is the invisible thread tying it all together. Why are we seeing a sudden shift to usage-based AI pricing? Why are enterprises demanding measurable productivity improvements from their software vendors?
Because money is expensive right now.
Exactly. Every single AI investment must prove its economic worth almost immediately to justify the borrowing costs. Investors aren't just throwing money at the word AI anymore.
The honeymoon is over.
The brief is specific. They are rewarding profitable AI companies. They are looking at semiconductor earnings to ensure the hardware is actually being sold and deployed, not just talked about.
They are demanding utility, not just potential.
Exactly. They are focused on long-term economic growth. You even see this search for stability in alternative assets. The brief notes Bitcoin remains near recent highs, and gold is fluctuating based on those shifting geopolitical sentiments in the Middle East that we started the hour with.
It all connects.
The macroeconomy is acting as a massive gravitational force, crushing the AI hype and forcing the industry to build systems that actually generate real-world value today.
It is incredible how tightly wound this whole system is. You have the stabilizing waters of the Strait of Hormuz calming the global oil markets, which gives utilities the breathing room to panic over the massive electricity demands of AI data centers,
Right.
which leads to hyperscalers pouring concrete like 19th century railroad barons, only to face 21st century lawsuits in places like Florida because the AI doesn't understand state laws.
It's a lot to process.
And all the while, we humans are navigating expensive mortgages and high inflation while watching the World Cup and craving authentic connection in an increasingly synthetic world.
We are living through a profound operating system upgrade for human society. And every sector, from international diplomacy to the power lines on your street, is feeling the strain of the installation process.
We really are. And as you, the learner, head into your Independence Day travel planning, I want you to look around. You are moving through a world that is rapidly, aggressively rewriting its own rules.
You really are.
You'll see the physical infrastructure projects on the highways, you'll feel the energy demands of the grid, and you'll interact with these efficiency-driven AI systems every time you open a work app.
It is all part of the same mechanism.
It is. And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over based on today's sources. The brief mentioned that preparations are already underway for America's 250th anniversary celebrations.
That's coming up fast.
It is. And as we look toward that incredible milestone, consider this: for the last 2.5 centuries, human labor and human minds have been the sole exclusive engines of our economic progress. Every patent, every building, every line of code was authored by us.
Yeah.
But by the time that anniversary actually arrives in just a few short years, how much of our daily infrastructure, from the smart grid powering our homes to the automated code running our financial lives, will have been co-authored by the very AI systems we are frantically pouring concrete for this weekend? Think about that as you watch the fireworks. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today, and as always, stay insanely curious.